Welcome back. You're listening to the discussion Strengthening Technology Risk Management in the Federal Government, sponsored by Tanium on Federal News Network. I'm Jason Miller. My guest today, Anthony Belfiore, the Senior Vice President and Chief Security Officer of Aon and a Tanium board member, and Ralph Kahn, the Vice President of Federal, also at Tanium. Before break, we were talking about the change that we've seen over the last 6, 9, 12 months or so, this move towards operational resilience, as Anthony described it well. I want to go to step out of the federal world for a second and move into the commercial space. Are there some good practices? I know there are. So what are the good practices that maybe Fed should consider, should look into, that they can pull from other, whether it's financial management or insurance or other technology companies, to deal with this growing risk space?
A couple of things in that space, gang, right? One, what we're realizing is very quickly in the private sector is that this is way bigger than just tech, right? This is a way bigger problem to mitigate and to manage than just throwing technology, innovative technology at these types of issues, because the way the threats are evolving, the way the attacks are happening, indeed, in many cases, we're going to have no recourse ahead of time. We don't have an ability to protect against 0 days. We don't have an ability to protect against someone being socially engineered and manipulated to do something ineffective in our operating environment. And so the point is that these things are going to happen. It's not if, it's when. And then it's not about, I'm compliant with all these standards. I've had all these great posture assessments. I'm looking great. But generally speaking, when the rubber hits the road and you get punched in the face, how do good companies get back up off the mat? What makes you operationally resilient? What makes your business resilient from a cyber perspective, from a people and human capital perspective, from all the different ways that you're going to be tested in terms of your core business processes and the capabilities you're going to bring to bear on the equation to actually get you back up. And so what you're going to see a pivot of, and this has been happening since about 2012, right? Historically, guys like me got paid to manage risks around things like malwares, around data leakage, around privacy events that make papers. Those were kind of the big headlines. But in 2012, we saw a big pivot. We saw the government of Iran start to enforce geopolitical endeavors in the cyberspace medium, and they started attacking every bank on Wall Street. They basically started DDoSing us from a Russian botnet. At the time, I was the global head of cyber security at JP Morgan Chase, and we were getting hit with daily DDoS attacks from September of that year through March of the following year. And the Iranians were effectively testing cyber nukes in cyberspace with impunity, right? Because no one really wanted to deal with what was going on. And one of the things that came out of that, and one of the things I realized, was that even though I had a 900-person global team of rock star guys who were ex-NSA and FBI and Secret Service guys and contractors, and even though I had a $500 million budget, it didn't matter how big we were going to still be susceptible to these attacks, and they were still going to hit us. And one of the things I realized was, okay, we did all the right things ahead of time, but we still got hit. And then when we went to do our recovery, we realized we had some gaps in our game. One of those gaps was the fact that, maybe our DR wasn't effective initially as it needed to be. Maybe one of those gaps was ahead of time, maybe we don't have cyber insurance to cover us for a business interruption or outage, right? Something to help us hedge and take the edge off the impact, right? To really reduce the severity of impact. So one of the things that we started to realize back in 2012, and now we've progressed almost 9 years, right, is that it's going to take a very diverse set of controls and capabilities to manage risk at scale. And post this event, post SolarWinds, and what we've realized here, you can have impacts everything from business interruption to data loss to regulatory noncompliance and punitive fines after the breach. I mean, you can get hit on so many different ways that it really forces you to think about a response strategy that is much more comprehensive than just people, process, and tech, and inclusive of new products, insurance, risk services, retainers with incident response companies. There's a whole litany of things that we need to do to make sure that we are in a position to respond effectively, mitigate severity in as timely a manner as possible, and get back up off the mat, right? That's the whole point. You got punched, get up as quickly as possible. And so with that pivot, a number of companies are in an interesting position today to optimally start addressing these issues in the market, whether they're services companies and contractors to come help, because all of us need more people with skills in this space. This is a very arcane discipline for those who, guys who used to be cops just can't go be cyber experts, right? Like, but although we see a lot of cyber experts becoming physical security experts, that pivot's happening, right? But it's going to take insurance and risk management on P&L and balance sheet issues. It's going to take people and human capital expertise to manage the risk in your human capital and your insiders. What if we have a disgruntled employee? What if we have a nation state actor inside our operation? What's going on here? These are all ways to look at risk. So a lot of these services companies and a lot of technology companies that help enable contextualized views into these spaces are going to do well over the next couple of years and start being adopted by a larger percentage of the market than they were historically.
And I wanted to add to that for a second, Anthony. As companies get themselves back off the mat, I wanted to double tap a point you made about it's about how quickly and effectively you can do that. And it starts with getting a picture of what happened and what you need to do about it, and then being able to react and respond, at speed, at scale, very fast. So time makes a difference, and the ability to do things, get good, accurate data, a good picture, and then be able to respond and react really quickly is critical to having a world-class resiliency capability. And that's something I know there's a big focus on in the government, is how much time does it take us to figure out what happened? How much time does it take to collect the data we need to figure it out? And then once we've got that, how long does it take us to respond, to put things back into an operational capability?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, Ralph, you nailed it. I mean, the two biggest factors that are going to help you with mitigating severity of impact, right? Mean time to identification, mean time to response. Lowering that, keeping it low, that's the golden attribute, the golden variable in this equation, right? We got to really, try to lower those. And that's where the most cyber resilient, the most operationally resilient companies on the planet are the guys that do that better than those ones that just go out and buy 50 million different technologies and put them together in some framework, but don't take the time to do the actual detailed analysis, planning, the overlay the people, the human capital risk, overlay the process risk, make sure we are resilient up and down the stack, and twice on every day of the week and twice on Sunday, especially in the technology.
Anthony, what you're talking about here really is a data problem. Understanding the data, again, mean time to identify the risk and or vulnerability and or attack, and then mean time to respond to it. That all comes back to data. So obviously data plays a big role in this and everything agencies and organizations do these days. Walk me through that role a little bit. How can agencies use data? What type of data should they be looking for? Help me understand better.
Look, from a data perspective, it's actually pretty overwhelming. We generate a lot of data today. Your business operation, between the technologies you use, your business partner relationships, the amount we have data overload, right? Some of it's sensitive, some of it's critical, some of it's prioritized, some of it's regulatorily mandated to be protected in a certain way. It's literally death by a million paper cuts for guys in our role who have to protect the interests of these entities, whether you're in gov or private sector. What do we target? What do we go after? How do we ensure we got the right level of, again, we have to spread the peanut butter on a piece of toast here. We don't have all enough peanut butter to spread all the way across. What do we spread it over, right? So how do you identify what are those mission critical processes or business processes, right? What's mission critical, right? What are the app ecosystems that support them? And then what are the underlying infrastructures that support those apps? To be able to draw those lines, to leverage technologies, actually like Tanium or others that can actually help you draw those lines, integrate business oversight or business insights and context into your operational analysis of risk is critical. Because if you don't, you could spend time and cycles and money remediating stuff that's not going to give you the optimal bang for the buck in risk mitigation, right? You need to understand your risk so you can allocate resource and capability in the most effective way possible. And so what I will tell you is the most critical thing coming out of this out of a SolarWinds breach, is for companies to really understand, A, what are those critical business processes? B, what are the apps and the systems that support them? And then C, on the back end, what do we do from a resilience perspective to protect ourselves across each of those ecosystems, right? Of app and infrastructure. Do we have good DR? Do we have monitoring? Do we have security response capability? Do we have insurance? God forbid we get hit and we have business interruption, that we're down for 2 days, that we're actually taking some of the edge off the hit, you know? How are we making our company operationally resilient from a business perspective?
So, and to double tap on that a little bit more, once they've identified those critical processes and data, they need to instrument it a little bit in terms of some things they need to collect over time because they're going to want to watch how they change and what the impact is, and other things they're going to need to be able to collect real-time data about what's going on now, right? When they identify something's happened, they need to be able to look back in the past and, you know, see changes and patterns. And then they also have to ask questions like, okay, what does it look like this very second? And then when they are able to draw some conclusions and take actions, as Anthony pointed out, they need to focus on those areas of processes, people that are key to their operation, and be able to execute the changes they need very, very quickly and with a high degree of assurance. And what I mean by that is whatever technology or process they use, when it says it makes a change, it needs to actually make the change. And so that's part of the DR process, not only saying I've got something that's going to do it, but validating that it actually works, and it works at scale, and it works as fast. Because there's plenty of technology out there that looks great in a lab and great in a pilot. And as Anthony, I'm sure, is aware over his long career, there are plenty of them that die when you actually have to go and do DR. So making sure it's actually gives you the kind of response you're looking for in a real life situation, as opposed to just kind of in test.
Gentlemen, this has been a great conversation. We're just about up on the time limit. Before I let you go, I'm going to give you both maybe about a minute each to walk me through. Okay, agencies, again, we always say this, Ralph, you and I have talked about this before. No one's at 0, no one's at 100. They're all in some sort of continuum. What can they take from this last 6-9 months and apply to the risk management approach? Let me start with you, Ralph. What are some things they can kind of implement today and get better going forward?
So I think Anthony had it right in terms of putting a focus on your key data, your key processes, and the things that are really important to keep your mission going, and focusing your energy there. I think making sure you're instrumented to collect data about your key processes and your people and what they're doing and the risks that are created by things like work from home, and being able to see that data in real time, make sure it's accurate so that the decisions you're making are timely, they're effective, and when you, God forbid, need to respond, you do it in a timely manner. But it starts with identifying the things that are critical in the first place and making sure that you've got timely and effective controls and responses available in the event something does happen.
And Anthony, bring it from the private sector perspectives, what are some things you would recommend when you talk to your government folks?
Yeah, look, I think you got to have the inventory. You got to have the prioritized view of your enterprise risk, regardless of the industry you're in. That's table stakes for any of us. What are those critical risks? In terms of those risks, what are the impacts? Really contextualized, quantified, and qualified for your board or your CO or whoever you need to communicate with in your chain of command about generally what these things mean. One of the biggest things that companies pay guys like me for me to do is to again do that contextualization, color it, quantify it, qualify it, let them understand the current state. What are we doing about it? What's our residual risk by not addressing it? And that could be impacts, like I said, operational impacts, financial impacts, contractual impacts, regulatory impacts, all of which have different, unfortunately, perils associated with them if they're not handled effectively, right? So understand the risks clearly, understand the knock-on effects and the exposures, make sure that your management, your command structure understands what those are clearly, and make sure that you're always putting your business in a position to make educated operational risk decisions by saying, hey, gang, this is the risk, this is the exposure. By the way, this is what we recommend we do about it, right? And if we were to do this about it, this would cut off this much of the residual risk tail at the back end of this exercise, so that I'm going to offer you options in terms of investment capability that, if you do this, you can start to mitigate that risk effectively. We're never going to get to mitigate all these things. That's the one thing. Guys like us get paid to deal with shades of gray, right? It's nothing's Boolean, nothing's binary, nothing's black and white. It's always about what is tolerable within our risk appetite. In order to define that entity that you're working at's risk appetite, you need to kind of lay out the options and let them make those educated risk decisions.
And with a whole new group of executives coming into the federal government, now is the time to start doing that. Now is the time to make those challenges known. Gentlemen, this has been a great conversation. I learned a lot. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So let me thank my guests. Anthony Belfiore is the Senior Vice President and Chief Security Officer at Aon and a Tanium board member. Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time.
It was great. Great to be here. Thank you.
And Ralph Kahn, the Vice President of Federal at Tanium. Ralph, always great to catch up.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. It's great being here.
You've been listening to the discussion, Strengthening Technology Risk Management in the Federal Government, sponsored by Tanium on Federal News Network. I've been your host, Jason Miller. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsnetwork.com and search Tanium.